Happy Wednesday morning, everybody. This is John and Boni Wagner-Stafford from Ingenium Books. Once again on our Facebook, what I like to think of as an author learning series of Facebook Live events. And today, something interesting and special. We're going to be talking about book structure and what happens when you sit down and you want to start writing and you have all these ideas in your head and you just don't know where to go. You don't know what to do next. You don't know if this idea you should work on first or second or third. And it's really difficult to either get started or see your way through all the trees in the forest and kind of get a 36,000 foot view of what you're trying to do. And I think Boni's got some great ideas and solutions for you and tricks about thinking about it in the right way to get you moving forward.
Exactly. And it's one of the big blocks for many of the nonfiction authors that we work with is they've got the book idea, they've got all the ideas and the topics, and they just don't see what the finished product is going to look like. And sometimes that's a big reason for writer's block. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to just give a little bit of an update or throw out to you. If you haven't seen our post, we're looking for some feedback because we're starting a podcast and we are testing the waters for what people think in terms of titles. So the podcast is, we work with nonfiction exclusively, nonfiction books. And so we're going to talk about in the podcast everything from planning, writing, publishing, marketing, and leveraging your nonfiction. And so we have a post on Facebook and another one on Twitter. And the ideas that we have out there for titles now are The Empowered Author, number one, Writing Nonfiction, number two, Everything Nonfiction, number three. And then we had an offline suggestion from a valued friend and colleague who said, what about a combination of 1 and 3? So empowered nonfiction. So you don't have to stick with the options that we've presented. If you have another idea, that's fine. And I thought something that's interesting. So we've put this request for feedback on a title for a podcast out to our Facebook and Twitter audiences, and the responses, it's interesting. So, so far the comments on the Facebook post are in favor of number 3, Everything Nonfiction. And on the Twitter post, it's the opposite. It's the Empowered Author that's getting the most votes. Anyway, so if you have a thought about what would resonate most with you,
Put it in the chat.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Put it in the chat.
Share it with us.
Or find the post and comment on the post. But anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, so getting back to structure and trying to find your way or make your way through all of these super ideas that you have and where do they go and what do you start with first? It's all about getting to the, not necessarily the right frame of mind, but thinking about it in the right way. And maybe a place to start is with what type of structure you're going to be applying. Is that a good starting point?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's not about worrying that you have an academician's grasp of all the potential types of literary structures for nonfiction. It's not about that at all. It's just about at least having a basic understanding of what some of the options are. And we have a great blog post on this, but essentially for nonfiction, story arc is still important, but I don't want you to really, my recommendation, especially for first-time nonfiction authors, is not to worry too much about what that story arc is at the moment. It'll start to reveal itself as you work with your structure. But so the most common type of structure is a 3-part structure. And that's really what we'll be talking through mostly today. And within the 3-part structure concept are some different options. You can have a circular structure where you, for example, if it's a timeline that you're talking about, the circular structure would be starting with now, going backwards, covering the middle, and then ending with now. So you start and end in the same place. My finger's going backwards from where I was thinking. And another really common and fairly easy thing, depending on what kind of book you're writing, is just a simple chronological. So, first, second, and third, beginning, middle, and end. And a 3-part structure is always beginning, middle, and end, but you can think about the beginning, middle, and end in these different ways. And then so you can manipulate time also with a 3-part structure. And that gets a little more complicated. And there's one author that we're working with right now where there is a pivotal event, and there's some history that you need to understand the pivotal event. And then there's the fallout of the pivotal event. So we're still using the 3-part structure, but within each of the three parts, I think my hand's going backward. There we are. Within each of the 3 parts are 3 parts. There's the event, there's the past, and there's the fallout. And then part 2 is moving forward with the event, moving forward with the past, moving forward with the fallout. So it's weaving some narratives through, but it's helping. If you think about the reader journey, it's really helping to walk them through everything they need to know in order to have the experience that we're trying to create.
So 3-part structure, beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that we were also talking about the what, the why, and the how at some point in time. Is that related at all? Or?
Yeah, great question. And so that's another way to think about the 3-part structure. You can think about, okay, so my part 1 is going to be explaining the what, whatever it is. What are we talking about? Are we talking about building a house? Okay, part 1 is going to be talking about building a house. Part 2 is the why. Why are you going to build a house? So you explore in part 2 all of the, every chapter will be something related to the why of building the house. And part 3 would be how you build a house, how you start, those sorts of things. So what, why, and how is another option. And, there's also different theories about should you start with why first. Mm-hmm. Simon Sinek, of course, would say, yeah, you start with why. You always start with why. We always start with why. Mm-hmm. So it could be why, what, how, but sometimes you need to have the what first in order to understand the why. So it depends on what you're talking about. Yeah. And then the type of book that you're writing is also going to inform a little bit about what type of structure. If you're writing a business book, or, for that matter, taking that building a house example, it's fairly clear what the reader needs to know first and what they need to know second, mm-hmm. and what they need to know third. When you get into narrative nonfiction and memoir and some other types of nonfiction books, you have more flexibility, and there's more to think about, and there are more options.
Yeah. So talking about. Here we are thinking about the structure and understanding that there needs to be a structure. Where do we start? Where do we start with our thinking about all this?
So
we've decided what structure we kind of want to use. Now we're going to go from there.
So now, and this is what we see happening is authors getting stuck. Maybe they haven't landed on what structure is going to be. But they have this, call it the jumble of all the potential ideas and topics, and do mm-hmm. I start writing that one first? And if I start writing that one first, is that coming first in the order? And so it helps to have a clearer picture. So there are a couple of things and a couple of exercises, if you like, that use. One is at the very beginning, because you will have, of course, already identified who your reader is, right? I know who I'm writing the book for. I know who is benefiting from the book. I know where they are at already, and therefore I know what they need to know. So you think about your reader, and you think about the story that you're telling in the book that you're writing. What is the first thing they need to know? So if you have that as a starting point, that is very helpful. And the second exercise, and you can swap the order of these. You don't have to do one first and then the other, but I do think these are useful exercises for anyone at the beginning of the book writing, nonfiction book writing journey. The second thing is you have a list, and if you don't have a list already, I encourage you to make a list. Make a list of every topic that you think you want to cover. So it doesn't matter what order it's in. It's like a brain dump. Don't worry about what's coming first, second, and third. It doesn't have to be logical. Just get them all
paper.
out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and whether it's paper or Word or your iPad or whatever, it doesn't matter what tool you use. It's to make sure you have a list. Then put that list away for a day, at least a day. And when you come back to it, you're not coming back to it necessarily to add to the list, although there's no rule. If you think of something else, of course you add it. But now you want to think about categorizing. What are the ways that you can categorize or bucket the ideas and the topics that you've now got listed? And it could be, again, for an example, it could be mindset types of things. It could be action steps. It could be environmental, like understanding the way things are, in order to then juxtapose how to be different with the way things are. So thinking about those kinds of things. And it is this very exercise with the example I was using a moment ago, where we have an event and a need to understand the past, and then a discussion of what the fallout is from the event. This is the exercise we went through in order to come up with, here is how we can kind of use a circular structure within the 3-part, not necessarily circular, but weaving narratives. So that is the kind of result that you're looking for when you start to bucket the ideas and the topics. And then once you are quite satisfied with your bucket, your bucketing, the 3 buckets, or maybe you have a 4th bucket. Often what happens if you go, okay, I've got my 3 buckets and I've got these other topics out here that don't seem to fit anywhere. So you don't throw those away yet. You just leave them on the side because, as you write, of course, things may shift.
Sure.
Yeah. So then you have your buckets, and now you can take a look at the 3 buckets with the subtopics and start to put a label. Maybe you've already got a label on each bucket. And this has nothing to do with titles. This has nothing to do with what the final chapter titles or section titles are going to be. These are simply notions,
categories,
concepts, whatever they are. And now you take a look at them and you ask yourself a question. Is there a logical order that my reader needs to have this information in? Maybe the thing that you had in the middle bucket, you decide that needs to wait till the end. They need to understand these first 2 buckets first before the end. Or it might be, my bucket number 3, that's actually foundational. My reader is going to need to know that. So it starts to reveal the order that you can think about the book in. And once you're playing with these notions, I think some clarity, my anticipation is, in our experience in working with authors, is that this is the place where some clarity starts to come, and which is a wonderful, liberating moment, because you start to see that, there is actually a manuscript and a book here. Before that, it's just a big mess of ideas. And I've actually heard this. I can't tell you how many times I've actually heard this from authors, like, okay, I see it. I am writing a book. I do have a book in me. I do understand what I'm doing.
Yeah. I just wanted to jump in a second. So I've now got my list. I've created 5 or 6 buckets, and any one of those buckets, as you were saying, you need to identify where they fall in the reader needing to know them in terms of a timeline. Do I need to know this first, second, and third? So any one of those buckets then gets put into the area of the event, the history, and or the...
Yeah, although it may not be event or history or past, or the subject may not lend itself to those particular categories, but and it depends on the book you're writing.
Those being the parts of the structure of the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but good point about the 5 or 6 buckets. So 3-part structure is the most common. often the easiest to
See,
work with.
I'm learning along with you guys. What she's talking about.
So that we are working with, and we have worked with a number of nonfiction authors where it's more of a how-to, and there are more than 3 steps.
Mhm.
And so it could be that each of the sections that you're structuring the book, you need more sections. And in this case, so don't try to limit yourself to only 3 sections. If you know that the process that you're teaching or that you're writing the book to explain to the reader has 5 steps. If it has 4 steps or 6 steps, and this is, there's no absolute right or wrong, but in general, odd numbers are better. They're easier to follow. They're easier to market. They're easier. So if you have, it's just 2 steps. You just, 1, you fill your bucket full of tie-dye, and 2, you put your t-shirt in it.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to try to add a 3rd step in there, which is first you need to twist your t-shirt so that you actually end up with a tie-dye model once you stick it in the bucket of dye. But so search for an odd number of steps if you can. Don't limit yourself to 3 parts in terms of this 3-part structure if what you're talking about doesn't easily fit into 3 buckets. So
cool.
Henrik's book, Achieving Change, for example, his is 5. It's a 5-step process. We still have, actually, if you think about it, it's still a 3-part book, and part 2 is the 5 steps. So the first part is everything you need to understand before you can dig into the 5 steps of developing an online course that will change people's behavior on the job. So section number 2 has 5 steps in it. Section number 3 is a bunch of case studies. So that's another way to think about it for a business book is, what do you need to understand first, how you do it, case studies.
Yeah.
Another option, 3-part structure. And then, another book we're working with an author on, there are literally 5 sections that we need to have 5 sections, and that's the way that it's going to work the best for that author. So 3-part, most common, pretty easy to work with. It's not the only way. But essentially, and then once you have your buckets and you're kind of happy with the order, there's another thing to understand.
This is...
And that is, you're not stuck with it.
Yeah.
You want to use it to your advantage. It most likely will help you get started writing. If it doesn't, you might need to do some more work. If it doesn't and you're still feeling blocked, there are a couple of things to think about. Are you letting the size of the project overwhelm you? In which case, make yourself think about pieces. Don't think about the whole thing. Or are you the type of person who gets lost in the pieces? In which case, come back out, think about the whole thing, and kind of let it flow. Are you the type of person that needs to write in order? Do you need to know that you're writing the first chapter and then the second chapter and then the third chapter? Try it for a little bit. But often that's not the way our brains work. I know mine doesn't. I get inspired, and I use that term loosely, but I get inspired to write about something that's, maybe right in the middle, and I haven't written the thing that's coming directly before it, and that's okay. It's about getting it done, not being perfect. And then if you need to change it as you flesh it out, you change it.
Yeah, I know that when we have, on our daily trek of running our business, I often have this long list of to-dos to get done during the day and whatnot, and I typically kind of make my way through all that by choosing a couple to work on and focus. The others are still there and they're still in front of me, but I kind of put a few aside just to focus on those. And maybe that's similar in terms of what if you're having trouble, what to work on, just choose a couple of them, 3 or 4 or 2 or 3.
Yeah. And then the other thing about this is writing a book, even if it's a short book, it is a huge endeavor. It's a huge endeavor in terms of your mindset. I can do this. I see myself as an author. It's a huge endeavor in terms of 20,000 words is 20,000 words. If you think about the average blog post is between 300 and 500 words. Many of them are longer, but so it's even a short book, 20,000 words, and many are 40 and 50 and 60 and 80 and 100,000 words. It's a big undertaking, and it is a lot of information and content that, unless you're used to working with large editorial projects, it can be very overwhelming and get in your way very quickly. And so this upfront work of thinking about the structure, thinking about how you're going to organize your topics, is a really important step.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that if you're just going to sit down, I'm just going to sit down and write, and I have no idea what the end result is going to be, and I have no idea what order it's going to be. I'm just going to get myself a first draft. Fine. If that's what works for you, fine. But I guarantee you, if you work that way, you're going to end up with a manuscript, and then you're going to go, oh, now I need to think about the structure.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You will still need to think about the structure. This way, though, you have a little bit of a map.
Yeah, and it's a big map, and it's a moving map. The thing I was just thinking about is it's a big task. It's sometimes daunting for many people, and that's some people, or most of our authors, they come and we work with them to work through all these problems. But I know that if you think about why you're writing your book, if you think about how you're going to change the world, that might allow you to take a step back and get you invigorated and focused on some of the smaller parts, as well as thinking about, gee whiz, I'm writing this book to change someone's life. And it becomes a little more important and maybe easier to be determined to work your way through it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm not sure did we leave anything out? I don't think so.
It's an important step.
It's an important step.
It needs to be done. It always needs to be done, because you're not going to get through the book if you don't get that structure right.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing that I will say is that it often helps to have somebody else go through a brainstorm process with you. And it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to, when I say brainstorm, I don't mean somebody to help you think of topics to throw at the wall like this piece of spaghetti, but a brainstorm in terms of, okay, here are all the topics. How do you see the bucketing, if you like, or the grouping of them? So, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be an author coach, but it should be somebody who has some familiarity with writing and reading and ideas or top, I guess it can be whoever you want, but it can be helpful to bring somebody into the tent with you. Depending on, how your thought processes work. So I think that's all we have for today. And then, so we want to encourage you, if you're listening on replay, on the replay, or at any point after this, if you have a question about structure or anything related to anything that we have said, we're happy. You can enter comments in the comments field, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, and we'll be monitoring, and we'll be endeavoring to get back.
Or even from the website, they can go to the website and enter comments.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And ingeniumbooks.com, ingeniumbooks.com. And if you're on the YouTube channel, we'd love it if you'd subscribe, because we're slowly trying to grow our...
Subscribe, follow, whatever all those things are. And another reminder, if you've got an idea about the name for the podcast, put it in the chat.
Yep.
And we might see you live in, I don't know, are we doing this daily live thing?
Well, this is a daily live thing, but true. Yeah. You might see us somewhere else. But anyway, hoping that you have a wonderful Wednesday Better Writer series. What did you call it? You called it something. I like that.
I forget already.
Yeah. Anyway.
It'll be at the top of this video.
Yeah. We're in this space of coming up with names for our stuff. Okay. Thanks very much for sharing our space. Sharing this space with us, and we hope that you found this helpful.
Yeah. Take care, everyone.